Silence swallowed the underground parking garage like the lid of a coffin being sealed. Green felt poker tables, their surfaces marked with cigarette burns and spilled whiskey. The air hung thick with cigar smoke, that particular haze that only accumulates where money and violence meet. 3 black SUVs idled outside, their engines running, their drivers' hands steady on loaded weapons. Inside the reinforced room, men in tailored suits stood frozen, their gold watches catching the fluorescent light like small, meaningless stars. Valentina Morgan stood in the center of it all, wearing a coffee-stained diner apron. She should not have been there. She had been cleaning tables on Ocean Drive when she noticed the boy, 6 years old, blonde hair, wearing a small gray suit that cost more than everything she owned, wandering toward the parking garage. Children did not just wander. She had followed. Then came the shouting. Then came the guns. The first shot cracked the air like thunder. She threw her body in front of Oliver Corsetti without thinking. Without breathing. Without considering that her $47 orthopedic shoes would never carry her away from this moment. The first bullet hit her left shoulder, spinning her body like a puppet with its strings cut. The second tore through her ribcage, the impact so violent it stole her breath entirely. The third lodged itself in her hip. The fourth grazed her spine, leaving a burning trail of fire down her back. She collapsed to the concrete floor, her body a shield, the boy safe beneath her. Her blood pooled outward, spreading across the gray concrete like spilled wine on white tablecloth, dark and unstoppable. Then came the silence. The terrible, absolute silence. Matteo Corsetti, 6'2", shoulders broad as a doorway, dropped to his knees beside her. His suit was Italian silk, worth $8,000, now soaked through with her blood. His hands shook. The hands that had ordered men into the ground without flinching. The hands that had executed rivals who looked him in the eye. Those hands trembled like they belonged to someone else entirely. "Stay with me," he whispered, and his voice cracked like old plaster. "Valentina, stay with me." His men watched in absolute shock. Carlo, his right hand for 12 years, stood frozen with his weapon still raised. Gino, his lieutenant since childhood, stared at his boss, the man who had taught him that weakness was death, cradling a dying waitress like she was made of spun glass, like she was the most precious thing he had ever held. Oliver screamed. His small hands gripped her blood-soaked sleeve, and he screamed his father's name over and over, a sound that would echo in that underground garage forever. $340,000 in cash lay scattered across the poker tables, forgotten. The game had stopped. Nothing mattered but the woman on the floor and the fact that she was leaving him, slipping away, her eyes growing distant like she was falling asleep. Before we continue, drop a like if this story hits you. Share it with someone you love and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Because what you just witnessed. It took 3 months of silent suffering to lead here. 3 months that changed everything. Now let us go back to the beginning. Let us go back to the night when Valentina Morgan had $17 in her pocket and no idea she was about to collide with the most dangerous man in Miami. 3 months earlier. November. The kind of November that makes you understand why people call it the dying season. The Clock Diner sat on Ocean Drive like a tooth that should have fallen out years ago. Its neon sign had flickered since 1987, the OFF and ON messages alternating in a rhythm that made your head hurt if you stared too long. Valentina always stared. She had been staring at that sign for 8 years. She counted her tips on the break room counter at 3:47 in the morning. The digital clock on the wall hummed its constant, mournful song. Bills in front of her, sorted by denomination. 3 singles. 14 ones. 2 fives. $17. The foreclosure notice sat on the plastic break room table, its edges already curled from repeated handling. $22,000. That was the magic number. The amount of money that stood between her and eviction. Between her and the street. The notice was folded, refolded, folded again, as if each new crease might change the number written in the corner. She did not fold it again. She placed it carefully in her apron pocket and returned to the kitchen. Derek Collins stood by the pass, his manager's vest stretched tight over a body that had once been muscular and was now running to fat. 48 years old, with the kind of face that had learned early how to hurt people. A wedding ring he had stopped wearing during his second marriage. Teeth that looked like they had been filed down by years of grinding them at night. "Table 4 needs refills," he said, not looking at her. "I'll get them," she said. His hand caught her wrist as she moved past. His fingers pressed into the soft underside of her arm, just below the sleeve. Not quite hard enough to bruise. "Not yet." "You're good at your job," he said, and his voice carried the kind of sweetness that preceded violence. "It would be a shame if something happened to your position here. This is the only place in Miami that will hire you, you know. Once you're blacklisted." She pulled her arm away. "I need to get back to work." "You're right," he said, releasing her. "You do." The diner had 7 customers. For truckers, one elderly woman who came every Tuesday and Friday for coffee and quiet, and a couple in booth 3 who had been holding hands without speaking for 40 minutes. The fluorescent lights hummed. The coffee maker hissed. The radio played a song from 20 years ago, something about love, something about staying. Valentina moved between tables like a ghost, quiet and faithful and invisible. This was her skill now. Disappearing. Her name was stitched on her apron in letters that had faded from blue to gray. Valentina. But most people just snapped their fingers when they needed her. The elderly woman in booth 7 looked up from her black coffee as Valentina refilled it. Her name was Dorothy. She came in alone, always alone, and she never tipped, but she was kind in a way that made kindness feel like a dangerous thing. "You look tired, sweetheart," Dorothy said. Her voice was like warm water, like something safe. "I'm fine," Valentina said. "Just a long shift." "You work too hard for too little." Dorothy's eyes, which were ancient and gray and impossibly knowing, studied her face. "Whatever you're running from, I hope you find something better." Valentina did not answer. She could not. If she opened her mouth, if she let herself feel seen for even a moment, she would break like old china, shattered beyond repair. 3:52 in the morning. The clock advanced. The shift stretched. At 4:15, Derek called her to his office in the back. The office was small and smelled like stale tobacco and instant coffee. He sat behind a desk that had never belonged to him, in a chair he did not deserve. The walls were painted a color that reminded her of hospitals and dying. "I received a call from Sophie Langford," he said. His fingernails were manicured. She noticed details like this now. Small things. The kind of small things that signaled that a person was planning something. "You know who she is, don't you?" Sophie Langford owned 3 hotel chains across Florida. She had been in the news for all the wrong reasons. A housekeeper had come forward last year with allegations. That housekeeper had recanted. That housekeeper had moved away. That housekeeper had never appeared in public again. "I don't know anything about her business," Valentina said. "Well, she knows about you." Derek leaned back in his chair. "She heard about your little refusal last week. When you said you didn't want to come back to my place after your shift." Valentina's stomach turned to stone. "She was actually very interested in talking to you," he continued. "About an opportunity. Sophie likes girls who are desperate. She likes girls with nowhere to go. She says desperate girls tend to understand the value of gratitude. I'm not interested." "Sophie says you are." He stood, and the room became smaller. "You have 3 days to reconsider." 3 days, Valentina. Because after that, you become a problem. And Sophie solves problems. She has lawyers. She has connections. And she has made it very clear that any girl who works in this city and refuses her invitations becomes unemployable. Permanently. The drive home took 17 minutes. Her car was a 2007 Honda Civic with 1 broken door handle and a check engine light that had been on for 6 months. She drove it carefully, as if aggressive driving might be the final thing that broke it beyond all repair. Her apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building with a locked lobby door that had not locked in 3 years. The hallway smelled like old cooking oil and the particular sadness of people living too close together. She climbed the stairs, her orthopedic shoes echoing, counting each step as if each one might be the last. Her apartment was 212 square feet. 1 bedroom. 1 bathroom. 1 kitchen so small that if you opened the refrigerator and stood in front of the stove, your shoulders would touch both. She had lived there for 4 years. She had never invited anyone inside. She sat on her bed and pulled the foreclosure notice from her pocket. $22,000. She had been saving for 7 years. She had $5,000 and change in a bank account that the bank kept threatening to close due to inactivity. The rest would need to come from somewhere. It would not come. She knew it would not come. At 4:47 in the morning, as she lay in the dark, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Derek gave me your number. 3 days to decide. After that, you don't work anywhere in this city again. SL. She did not respond. She could not. The cold was already spreading through her chest, the kind of cold that starts in your lungs and spreads outward until you are nothing but a body that survives. Outside her window, Miami sprawled like a sleeping animal. Ocean Drive was coming alive with the kind of people who never slept, people with money and purpose and places to be. She pressed her forehead against the window glass and tried to remember what it felt like to be okay. For hours later, the sun would rise. 7 hours later, she would return to the Clock Diner. Derek would not look at her. The foreclosure notice would still be in her pocket, the numbers still impossible, the deadline still approaching like a train with no brakes. She did not know that this day would mark the beginning of everything. That tonight, when she stepped outside for her evening break, a small boy in a grey suit would wander into traffic. That she would save him without thinking. That his father would be watching from across the street, and that one act of desperate kindness would change everything. But for now, she only knew the cold, and the debt, and the 3 days stretching before her like a sentence she could not escape. The winter night pressed down on Miami like a hand holding its breath. 2:14 in the morning. The Clock Diner sat half empty, fluorescent lights humming their tired song, and Valentina Morgan was counting her survival in crumpled bills on the back office table. $17. That was all Derek Collins had left her after docking her pay for a plate he himself had smashed against the counter during one of his moods, one of those moments when his hands became weapons and the staff became targets. She arranged the bills in a small stack. 17. Her rent was due in 72 hours. $850. The math was not complicated. The ending was already written, already stamped with an eviction date on the foreclosure notice, folded and refolded so many times it was almost transparent, hidden beneath her apron where the fabric met her skin, where the paper crinkled against her ribs like a second heartbeat measuring the countdown to nothing. Valentina was 27 years old, but her eyes belonged to someone much older, someone who had learned long ago that the world had no mercy built into its architecture. Her uniform hung on a frame that had become too thin, her orthopedic shoes worn through at both heels, the left one patched with duct tape that had begun to peel. 8 years she had worked at the Clock Diner. 8 years of graveyard shifts, of cooking eggs she could not afford to eat, of watching tourists and businessmen tip $2 on $50 meals, of Derek Collins's hands finding reasons to touch her shoulders, her back, the small of her waist, each touch a reminder that she was powerless in a city built for people with options. She stood, her knees cracking, the sound loud in the small office. The fluorescent panel overhead flickered like it was dying. She clipped her apron closed, tucked the $17 into her pocket alongside the foreclosure notice, and pushed through the kitchen doors into the dining room. The night manager, Lewis, was already mopping the black and white checkered floor, moving in slow circles, his headphones in, lost in a world that required no conversation. Derek was not here tonight. He would not be here for another hour. When he arrived for the closing inventory, he would find her there, and his eyes would scan her like she was a problem that needed solving. She could feel it already, the weight of his attention, the way his voice would drop when he spoke to her, how he would find some reason, some excuse to be alone with her in the back. Tonight, though, she had a plan. Tonight, when her shift ended at 2 a.m., she would leave before he arrived. It was not much of a plan, but it was the only one she had. At 1:58, Valentina untied her apron and hung it on the hook behind the counter. She did not look at Louis. She did not say goodbye. The fewer people who noticed her comings and goings, the better. She pushed through the glass doors and stepped into the Miami night, and the cold hit her like a surprise, sharp and real, cutting through the exhaustion that lived in her bones. The street was empty. Ocean Drive was 2 blocks away, still alive with music and laughter, but here on this side street, there was only the hum of a closed laundromat sign, the buzz of a dying neon light from a parking garage across the way, and the sound of her own breathing, visible in small clouds of mist. She had walked maybe 30 feet when the car door opened. The black Mercedes was idling at the corner, its engine running smooth and expensive. The rear passenger door swung open, and a small figure in a grey wool coat tumbled out, his hair dark and fine, his face lit with the kind of determination only a child could possess. He was 6 years old, maybe, with Matteo Corsetti's exact bone structure already visible in his face, the sharp cheekbones, the intensity in his dark eyes. Behind the wheel, a nanny in a black uniform was looking at her phone, distracted, her attention somewhere else entirely. The boy, Oliver, did not think. He did not weigh consequences. He saw a cat, a scrawny orange thing picking through garbage, and the cat was in the street, and he needed to reach it. His small shoes slapped against the frozen pavement as he ran, his coat flaring behind him like wings, and he was already in the center of the street when Valentina heard the engine. The delivery truck came around the corner at 40 miles an hour, its headlights wide and blinding, its horn a scream that shattered the night into pieces. Oliver was small enough that the driver might not see him until it was too late. Might already be too late. Valentina did not think. Thinking would have killed her. Instead, her body moved on an instinct older than fear, older than self-preservation. She sprinted, her duct-taped shoe catching the pavement but holding, her arms extended, her breath exploding from her lungs in a sound like a prayer. She reached Oliver in the space between one heartbeat and another, grabbed him, twisted, threw herself backward and to the side, and they hit the frozen ground together just as the truck roared past them, so close that wind from its passing tore the breath from her mouth and scattered her hair like she had been struck by lightning. The truck's taillights disappeared down the street. Silence crashed back in. Oliver was crying, high-pitched and terrified, but his body was whole, unhurt, wrapped in her arms. Valentina's knee was bleeding through her tights, the skin scraped raw and burning, her apron torn at the seam. The foreclosure notice had fallen from its hiding place and lay on the frozen pavement beside her, one corner fluttering in the wind. Then the black Escalade arrived. It came from nowhere and everywhere, tires screeching, and the world seemed to compact itself into a smaller, sharper space. The doors opened in sequence, and men emerged like water finding its level, their movements coordinated, their eyes scanning the street with the practiced attention of people trained to calculate threats. The front passenger door opened last, and Matteo Corsetti stepped out into the freezing night. He was 6'3", his frame built broad across the shoulders, his suit cut from fabric that cost more than Valentina made in a month. The material was midnight blue, and his dress shirt was open at the collar, revealing the kind of chest that came from years of violence transformed into power. His hair was dark with silver at the temples, cut with expensive precision, and a scar ran from the corner of his left eye down to his cheekbone like someone had tried to erase half his face and failed. A gold watch caught the streetlight on his left wrist. Rings on 2 of his fingers caught it again. He dropped to one knee beside Oliver, and his hands, those dangerous hands, moved with a gentleness that seemed impossible. He checked the boy's shoulders, his ribs, his legs, his face, searching for injury with the attention of a man who understood the fragility of the things he loved. "Papa," Oliver sobbed, reaching for him. "She saved me. She saved me." Matteo's eyes moved from his son to Valentina, and in that moment, something happened that neither of them could have predicted. His gaze, which had been trained on violence and power and the endless complications of his empire, landed on her like it had been searching for something and finally found it. He saw the bleeding knee, the torn apron, the way her whole body trembled from the cold and the adrenaline and the shock of still being alive. He saw the foreclosure notice on the pavement, caught beneath her shoe. "What is your name?" His voice was deep and solid like an oath, like the kind of thing that, once spoken, could not be unsaid. "Valentina Morgan," she whispered. She was still on the ground, still holding Oliver, unable to move, unable to think past the basic fact of survival. "I work at the Clock Diner. 2 blocks down." Matteo rose. He pulled a money clip from his jacket pocket, the leather worn soft with age, and peeled off 500s, bills so crisp they looked like they had never been touched. He extended them toward her. "Take this." "No." The word came out before she could stop it. Valentina shook her head, her hand still gripping Oliver. "No. I do not want money. I am glad he is safe. That is all." Carlo and Gino, who stood 3 paces behind their boss, exchanged a look. In 15 years of working for Matteo Corsetti, they had never seen anyone refuse his money. They had never seen anyone refuse him anything. But this woman, bleeding and broken, holding his son like he was the only real thing left in the world, had just turned down $500 without hesitation or negotiation. Matteo stared at her like she was a language he did not speak, like she was something that did not fit into the architecture of his understanding. Then he extended his hand to help her up. "Let me take you to a hospital." "I cannot afford it," Valentina said simply. She used his hand to pull herself to her feet, her knee screaming, her whole body moving like something assembled incorrectly. She looked at Oliver once more, at his terrified face, at the way he clung to his father. "I am just glad he is okay." She limped back across the street toward the diner, a shoe catching slightly on the uneven pavement, her torn apron hanging open. She did not look back. She could feel Matteo's attention following her like weight, like something physical and real, but she did not turn around. Instead, she pushed back through the diner doors into the fluorescent light and the hum of the coffee machine and the sound of Louis still mopping, and she sat down in the back booth because her leg would not hold her anymore, and she pressed her forehead against the cold window and watched the black Escalade sitting outside, its engine running, its windows tinted dark as secrets. Matteo stood on the sidewalk with Oliver in his arms, and his lieutenant Carlo stepped close. "Boss?" "Find out everything about her," Matteo said, his voice quiet, his eyes still on the diner. "Her name, her address, her situation. Everything. Tonight." But what no one on that frozen street understood was that 8 years earlier, on a night much like this, Matteo's first son had been stillborn at 38 weeks, a child named Marco who had never taken a breath, who had never opened his eyes, who existed only in the nursery on the 45th floor of Matteo's penthouse, untouched, unchanged, a monument to grief that would not heal. The crib was still there. The mobile was still there. The tiny clothes folded in the dresser were still there, and Matteo had not entered that room in 8 years, could not enter it, the door locked against a pain too large to survive. Seeing Valentina throw her body in front of Oliver without hesitation, without calculation, without expecting anything in return, had awakened something in him that he believed had died with that unnamed boy. It was not rescue he felt. It was recognition. It was the terrible, impossible knowledge that she had given his son what he had never gotten to give his own, a mother willing to die rather than let him be hurt. And in that moment, standing on a frozen street in Miami at 2:14 in the morning, Matteo Corsetti understood that his life had just divided into 2 parts, before she refused his money, and everything that would come after. The fluorescent lights above the poker tables hummed like a swarm of angry insects, casting everything in a sickly green glow. Valentina's hands trembled as she carried the tray of drinks across the underground parking garage, her worn sneakers soundless against the concrete floor. The foreclosure notice sat folded in her apron pocket, $65,000 in black ink that might as well have been $1 million. 3 days. She had 3 days before the bank seized everything her mother had left her. The poker game unfolded in the basement of the Meridian Hotel, a world of leather chairs and mahogany tables that cost more than her entire apartment building. Men in suits worth $30,000 each pushed stacks of cash across felt as if it were monopoly money. Valentina recognized some faces from the news, lawyers, politicians, one judge. And then there was the presence that made the entire room shift, like a change in air pressure before a storm. Matteo Corsetti stood near the far table, whiskey in hand, his custom black suit tailored to fit shoulders broad enough to carry the weight of an empire. He was tall, 6'1", with dark hair swept back from a face that looked carved from marble. But it was his eyes that stopped everything, storm grey, penetrating, the kind of eyes that had witnessed things most people could not survive knowing. A thin scar ran from his left temple to his cheekbone, and he wore a gold Rolex that caught the light like a piece of the sun itself. Carlo and Gino flanked him, younger men with the same deadly stillness, the same coiled readiness. Valentina did not recognize him as the man from the street 2 nights ago. That man had seemed almost human. This version seemed engineered to dominate. "More bourbon, sir," she whispered, approaching his table. Matteo turned, and something flickered across his face, recognition, then shock, then something darker. "You," he said. Not a question. A statement of fact. "I am working tonight," Valentina said, which was technically true and completely false at the same time. Derek had ordered her here. Derek had forced her into this basement like a puppet jerked on strings. Matteo's eyes traveled down her body, cataloguing the stained apron, the shoes held together with hope and tape, the way her left shoulder hunched as if bracing for impact. Carlo noticed him noticing, and in that moment, something shifted. In 15 years, Carlo had never seen his boss look at anyone with anything resembling concern. "Where is Derek?" Matteo asked quietly. "Upstairs." "He is?" "I know where he is." The poker game continued around them, but everyone was listening now. The clink of chips fell silent. The scratch of cards paused. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Derek appeared then, drawn by some instinct that survival was ending. He was 42, balding, with the soft face of a man who had never known real consequences. His wedding ring caught the light as he approached. The wife at home had no idea what he really was, what he did in the spaces between his promised appearances. "Mr. Corsetti, is everything satisfactory with the service?" Derek's voice went up at the end, turning the statement into a question, a plea for forgiveness from someone who had done nothing wrong. "Yet." "You brought her here," Matteo said. "Not an observation. An accusation." Derek's smile became a rictus. "Valentina is one of our finest employees." "She is terrified," Matteo interrupted, and he was right. Valentina could feel her own fear like a second skin, sticky and suffocating. "And you know exactly why." The room had gone completely still. This was the moment before violence, the pause before gravity reasserted itself. Gino's hand drifted toward the gun beneath his jacket. Carlo stepped slightly closer to Matteo, a motion so subtle only someone trained in violence would notice it. "Did he hurt you?" Matteo asked Valentina, his voice dropping so low she almost could not hear it. She wanted to lie. Lying had kept her alive for 8 years. But under the weight of his gaze, something inside her broke open like a dam. There have been times." Her voice fractured. The words came anyway, painful as broken glass. "When I refused his advances. He pushed me into the storage closet. He grabbed my wrist. He told me I would never work again if I reported him. He docks my pay for things I did not break. He owns me." The room exhaled. Every man in that basement understood the exact nature of Matteo's response, and none of them envied Derek Collins. Not one. "Get out," Matteo said. "Mr. Corsetti, please, I was just—" "Get out." Derek moved like his legs had forgotten how to work, stumbling backward, nearly tripping over his own feet. The door to the parking garage slammed behind him with a sound like a coffin closing. Oliver burst from the side room then, where a nanny had been watching him play. The 5-year-old ran straight to Valentina and wrapped his small arms around her waist. "Papa! It is the lady who saved me from the car." Matteo knelt beside Valentina's chair. This man, who had ordered executions without changing his expression, who had built an empire on fear and strategic violence, knelt beside a waitress like she was made of something precious and breakable. "You are safe now," he said, and she believed him. In that moment, she believed he could reach into the sky and rearrange the stars if she asked. "Tell me what you need." Valentina's breath came in shallow gasps. She had not meant to tell him anything. She had meant to serve drinks and collect tips and disappear back into the invisibility that had kept her breathing. "I need." The words came before she could stop them. "I need $65,000 in 3 days or I lose my apartment. Everything I have. It is all I have left of my mother." She expected him to laugh. She expected dismissal. Instead, Matteo pulled out his phone, pressed it to his ear, and said, "Transfer $200,000 to Valentina Morgan's account. Now." "Yes, I know it is the middle of the night. Do it anyway." He ended the call. 200,000. Valentina whispered. "The apartment is secure. You will keep it," Matteo said. "The extra is for you to do whatever you need to do. Education. Distance from Derek. Life. Why would you help me?" "I am nobody," Valentina said, and the words tasted like truth and like a lie all at once. Matteo's expression shifted, something ancient and wounded moving across his face. "You saved my son. You are not nobody. You are the woman who threw herself in front of a car for a child who was not yours. That makes you exactly the opposite of nobody." Oliver pressed closer to her. "Papa says you are brave." Matteo stood, and in standing, he seemed to grow larger, to fill the entire basement with his presence. He turned to Carlo. "Get her out of here. Get her home safely." "And Carlo?" "Yes, boss. Find out everything about Derek Collins. Everything. I want to know his schedule, his secrets, his weaknesses, his relationship with Sophie Langford. I want to know it all." Carlo nodded. This was how it always went. Matteo never raised his voice when he was truly angry. The quiet was the warning. Valentina found herself being ushered toward the elevator by Carlo, Oliver's small hand in hers, Matteo's words echoing behind her like a prophecy, "You saved my son." What none of them understood, watching the security footage from upstairs, was that Sophie Langford had seen everything. She stood in the private observation room wearing her $4,000 suit and her 5-carat diamond wedding ring, her perfectly highlighted blonde hair pinned back from a face that had cost $80,000 to make beautiful. Beside her, Derek stood trembling, understanding finally the magnitude of what he had done. "She saw you," Sophie said quietly. "She does not know anything. She's just a waitress." "A waitress that Matteo Corsetti is now personally invested in protecting," Sophie interrupted. "Do you understand what you have done? Do you understand that you have just given that girl access to him? To his inner circle? To information?" Derek's face had gone the color of wet concrete. Sophie's phone buzzed. She read the message, and her expression hardened into something that looked like marble. $67 billion moved through his accounts in the last 2 hours. He is consolidating assets. He is preparing for something. She looked at Derek, and there was no mercy in her eyes, only the calculation of damage control. "She has to go," Sophie said. "If she talks, if she tells anyone what we have done, what you have done, everything we have built collapses. Every hotel I own, every connection I have, every deal I have made, all of it disappears." "I will handle it," Derek said, but his voice shook. Sophie smiled, and it was the smile of a predator who had just identified prey. "No. You will not. You have already proven you cannot handle anything. I will handle it." The elevator descended through the garage, and Valentina watched her reflection disappear into darkness, a woman with $17 in her bank account 2 hours ago, now carrying the weight of $200,000 in her phone, Oliver's hand small and warm in hers, and the terrible knowledge that something had shifted. That she had been seen. That she was no longer invisible. The car was waiting at street level, a black Escalade with tinted windows running silent as a prayer. Carlo opened the back door. Rain had begun to fall outside, cold November rain that smelled like concrete and gasoline. "Do not go to your apartment tonight," Carlo said as she stepped toward the vehicle. "Mr. Corsetti wants you somewhere safe. There is a hotel across town. Room is already reserved. Go there, rest, and in the morning, we will discuss what comes next." Valentina nodded. She understood that Matteo's protection came with strings, with obligations, with the price of owing a man who collected debts the way other people collected stamps. But as the Escalade pulled into the rainy Miami night, carrying her toward safety that felt too fragile to believe in, she could not shake the feeling that everything had just begun. The stairwell door crashes open like a gunshot in the silence. Derek Collins stumbles out, wild-eyed, his hand trembling around the grip of a 9mm pistol. His shirt is sweat-soaked. His eyes dart left and right like a cornered animal searching for escape. Behind him, two men in police uniforms emerge, Officer Ramon and his partner, their badges catching the fluorescent light of the concrete hallway, their weapons already drawn. Valentina is holding Oliver's hand. The boy is chattering about his teacher, about a painting he made with blue and yellow colors, completely unaware. His small fingers are warm in hers. The hallway is maybe 40 feet long. The only sound is the hum of the ventilation system and the soft echo of Oliver's voice. Derek raises the gun. "You ruined everything," he screams, and his voice cracks like breaking glass. Corsetti was going to invest in Sophie's hotels, a $65,000 deal, and now he is asking questions, now she is cutting me off. The gun barrel swings. Not toward Valentina. Past her. Toward the child. Valentina's brain processes this in the space between heartbeats. For shots. She knows gun trajectories, one of Derek's lovers bragged about them once over coffee at the diner. For shots meant to erase a witness. For shots to a 7-year-old child. She does not think. Her body moves like it has been waiting 8 years for this moment. She throws herself in front of Oliver, wrapping her entire frame around him, pulling him down to the concrete floor as Derek's hand jerks upward. The first bullet tears through her left shoulder. White fire explodes through her body. Pain so complete it erases thought. But she does not let go. Oliver is screaming, but she is louder, curling over him, protecting him with the only thing she has left to give, her broken body. The second bullet enters through her ribcage. It tears through soft tissue, through lung, and the pain is different now, a suffocating, drowning sensation. She tastes blood. Her left arm goes numb. Still, she holds him. The third bullet lodges in her hip. Bone cracks. Shatters. Her left leg stops responding. Blood floods the concrete beneath them in a dark, spreading stain like spilled wine. The fourth bullet grazes her spine. Her legs go completely still. Paralyzed. She cannot move her lower body anymore, cannot run, cannot fight. But Oliver is beneath her. Oliver is alive. Oliver is safe. Derek stands frozen, staring at what he has done. The gun hangs at his side. His hands are shaking so violently the weapon clatters to the concrete floor. Footsteps. Running footsteps. Matteo appears from around the corner, having heard the first shot. He takes in the scene in a single moment, the blood, the small boy crying underneath a woman, the gun on the floor, the two police officers backing away. His face goes completely blank. This is the expression his men know. This is the look that precedes something terrible. Carlo and Gino appear seconds later, weapons drawn, moving with the precision of men who have done this 1,000 times before. Matteo walks past them toward Derek, who is backing toward the stairwell, hands raised, tears streaming down his face. "Please," Derek whispers. "I did not mean to, Sophie made me," she said. "If I did not." Matteo does not raise his gun. Death would be too quick. Too easy. Too merciful for a man who just tried to murder his son. Instead, Matteo pulls out his phone. His voice is ice. It is done. Send them in. 3 minutes. That is all it takes. The stairwell doors burst open and 12 men flood the garage wearing FBI windbreakers, their badges catching the light. Federal agents. Real ones. Matteo had tipped them off hours ago, the moment Carlo's surveillance team caught Sophie's plan on intercepted radio frequency. He had known this was coming. He had been waiting. Derek collapses to his knees, trembling like a wounded animal cornered by hunters. "You set me up," he gasps. "No," Matteo says, his voice so cold it could freeze blood. "You set yourself up 8 years ago when you first put your hands on her." The FBI arrests him right there in the underground garage. News crews that Sophie herself invited to document her charity poker event capture everything on camera: Derek in handcuffs, screaming denials, blood on his clothes from Valentina's spray. Upstairs, Sophie Langford watches the live feed on her private office monitor. Her hands go white-knuckled on the desk. Her phone begins ringing. Investors. Board members. Partners. All of them pulling their money in real time as the video goes viral, 500,000 views in the first hour, then 1 million, then 2 million by morning. Every news outlet in the country is running the footage. Officer Ramon and his partner are arrested trying to flee through the east exit. Carlo's men had blocked every escape route an hour ago. The corrupt officers collapse under the weight of charges: bribery, conspiracy, attempted murder, conspiracy. Sophie tries to run. She makes it to the parking garage elevator, her heels clicking against marble, a designer purse clutched like a lifeline. FBI agents stop her before the doors close. Cameras capture everything, her screaming that she is innocent, that Derek acted alone, that she is a respected businesswoman, that they cannot do this to her. Agent Morrison reads her rights, his voice steady and clinical. Conspiracy to commit murder. Bribery of public officials. Witness tampering. Labor trafficking. Conspiracy to defraud. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Sophie's face drains of color. Her perfect face. Her expensive face. All of it crumbling in front of cameras. "I own 12 hotels," she says, her voice shaking. "I have lawyers. This is a mistake." Agent Morrison glances at his phone. "You had 12 hotels. Your board voted you out 17 minutes ago. The vote was unanimous. It is trending on Twitter." Sophie's knees buckle. Her own allies have abandoned her. The people she threatened, the people she blackmailed, the people she silenced, they all turned on her the moment her power became liability instead of asset. In the span of an hour, Sophie Langford goes from one of Miami's most respected hotel owners to a woman facing federal prison, her reputation evaporating like water under a merciless sun. The officers lead her away. She does not struggle anymore. She simply walks, broken, into the darkness of the federal holding vehicle. Back in the hallway, Matteo kneels beside Valentina. She is fading. Her eyes flutter open and closed. Blood pools beneath her like spilled wine, spreading across the grey concrete in a terrible, dark map. Oliver is crying, clutching her hand, calling her name over and over. "Valentina," Matteo whispers, and his voice breaks like crystal struck by a hammer. "Stay with me. Please. Stay with me." He lifts her hand, presses it against his chest, against his heart, and for the first time in 8 years, since the day his first child was stillborn, since the day he stopped believing in mercy, tears stream down Matteo Corsetti's face. Carlo and Gino step back quietly, exchanging a look. Neither says anything. They do not need to. In that moment, they both understand. We saw Matteo Corsetti cry. Paramedics arrive, their equipment clattering, their voices urgent and professional. They lift Valentina onto a stretcher with careful hands, beginning emergency measures, their voices calling out numbers and medications and procedures. Her eyes find Matteo one more time. "Oliver," she whispers. "Is he?" "He is safe," Matteo says, his hand still holding hers. Because of you. Because you are the bravest person I have ever known. Her hand falls away as the paramedics wheel her toward the ambulance. Matteo follows, never letting go, riding in the back with her, holding her hand as the vehicle races through the rain-soaked Miami night toward the hospital. Oliver sits in the front seat, wrapped in a blanket, silent now, his small body shaking. What Matteo does not know yet, what he will discover in the next 72 hours, is that Valentina will survive. That she will spend 6 months in physical therapy learning to walk again, learning to trust her body. That she will write him a farewell letter before surgery, confessing everything she feels, everything she is afraid of, everything she wants to tell him but cannot while lying in a hospital bed. That when he finds that letter, he will understand that saving her body was never the real victory. The real victory comes when she chooses to stay. 6 months later, the penthouse overlooks Biscayne Bay, and Valentina Morgan stands at the floor-to-ceiling windows wearing a simple cream-colored dress that cost more than she used to make in a month. Her shoulder moves freely now, the physical therapy complete, the scars beneath the fabric still tender but healing. She touches the glass and it is warm from the afternoon sun. Oliver runs past her, his small feet thundering across marble floors, chasing Carlo's daughter through the living room. The sound of children laughing echoes through spaces that were once silent as tombs. Matteo watches from the kitchen doorway, coffee in hand, and something in his chest that was broken has been soldered back together with love. "Come," Matteo says, his voice like warm velvet. "There is something I want to show you." Valentina follows him down the hallway, their fingers interlaced. He has held her hand every single day since the hospital, as if afraid that if he lets go, she will disappear like the ghost she was before. The nursery door stands open. For 8 years, it was sealed shut, a tomb for grief that could not be buried. Inside, baby Marco's crib still waits, but Matteo no longer avoids this room like a blade wrapped in ice. He sits in the rocking chair, the one his wife sat in before she died, before grief became the only language he spoke. "I come here now," he says quietly, holding the framed photograph of his first son. "I remember him without drowning. That is because of you, Valentina. Because you taught me that love does not have to be a cage." Valentina kneels beside the rocking chair, her hand on his knee. "You chose to let me in. That was your courage." The portrait hangs in the living room now, Valentina, Matteo, and Oliver, painted from a photograph taken at Coconut Grove Park 3 weeks ago. A family. Not by blood, but by choice, by deliberate, terrifying choice. Derek Collins sits in a federal penitentiary in upstate New York, year 1 of 40 stretching before him like a sentence with no parole. His cellmate is a man whose daughter he once grabbed in a supermarket parking lot. The universe has a way of organizing its own justice. Sophie Langford lost everything in the span of 72 hours. The FBI seized her hotels at dawn. They found evidence catalogued in spreadsheets, in emails, in the testimony of 47 women she silenced with money and threats. The Langford name, which opened every door in Miami's elite circles, now opens only courtroom doors and prison cell doors. 35 years. No parole until she is 87 years old. Valentina established the House of Hope 3 months ago, funded by Matteo, staffed by women who survived what she survived. It is on Ocean Drive, in a building that once housed a nightclub where Derek Collins took his supervisors for celebration drinks. The building remembers nothing of that. It remembers only this, the phone that rings at 3 in the morning when someone needs to escape. The beds that wait. The counselors who do not ask questions, who simply believe. She is no longer invisible. Matteo pulls her to her feet, leading her to the living room where their portrait commands the wall. His hand finds the small of her back, a gesture so simple it breaks her heart. He has never let her go, not since the ambulance ride through rain, not since for days in a hospital room where he held her hand and did not sleep, not since the moment he read her farewell letter and understood that saving her body was meaningless if she was not also saved in her heart. Every day, Matteo says, his voice steady now, no longer breaking, we choose between fear and trust. Between closing ourselves off and opening our hearts. You taught me that choice the night you threw yourself in front of those bullets. You were not just saving Oliver. You were showing me that love, real love, is not about control or power or keeping people safe by pushing them away. He touches her face with his hand, and his fingers are gentle, reverent, the fingers of a man who knows exactly what he almost lost. Real love, he continues, is standing in front of the danger together. It is saying yes to someone even when that yes costs everything. It is believing that you matter when the whole world has spent years telling you that you do not. Valentina kisses him. It is soft at first, then deeper, and Oliver screams with joy from the other room. Carlo and Gino watch from the kitchen, exchanging glances they have exchanged 1,000 times but never like this, with something that looks almost like hope. This is what redemption looks like, not the absence of darkness, but the choice to stand in the light anyway. The Miami skyline glitters at sunset, orange and gold bleeding into the bay. Valentina Morgan spent 8 years being nothing, being invisible, being afraid. She counted every penny. She hid bruises under long sleeves. She ate leftover food from a garbage can and told herself it was enough because it had to be enough. Then one frozen winter night, she chose to matter. She chose to step in front of a moving car for a child who was not hers. She chose to stand before a man the world feared and say that she was worth saving. She chose to believe that sometimes the most dangerous thing we can do is let someone love us back. Matteo's empire is changing. His businesses are moving into legitimacy, slowly, carefully, each one a step away from the old code. He established the Valentina Morgan Foundation for Domestic Violence Survivors, funded with money that used to buy guns and silence. His men no longer understand the business, but they understand this: their boss found something worth protecting that is not made of concrete or blood. Oliver will grow up knowing his father as something other than a monster. He will have bedtime stories and tucked blankets and a woman who stayed. When the doorbell rings at 8 o'clock, it is not an assassination attempt or a rival or a demand for payment. It is a delivery of flowers from the House of Hope, where Valentina's name is spoken with reverence by women who came in broken and left standing upright. Every day we choose between fear and trust, between closing ourselves off and opening our hearts. If this story moved your heart, if it made you believe that second chances exist, that redemption is possible even for the hardest men, even for the invisible women, drop a like and share it with someone who needs to remember they matter. Subscribe to this channel because tomorrow we bring you another story that will change how you see the world. Every single story changes something. What would you have done in Valentina's place? What would you have chosen? Tell us in the comments. Your words matter to us. Your thoughts matter. We wish all of you watching this video good health, a joyful life, and days filled with peace and happiness. No matter how hard life gets, remember that after the rain, the sky clears. After fear, there is trust. After invisible, there is seen. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. Goodbye, and we will see you again in the next video.